a globe, and here is the texture for the globe. All right, you can see that these points, you can see the 2D representation of our object. It's kind of how a map is laid out. If you kind of think of, if you kind of think of the way the world, or the way globes, atlases, and maps work, the world is a 3D object. So you have cartographers, they go around and they take many 2D images, many segments of the Earth, and say, all right, this segment represents this area, and it kind of works that way. And that's kind of the analogy I'll be using once we get a little bit more into UVs. But again, this is just an overview. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to go and just grab a point in space. Let us go. Australia's right here. I'm going to select Australia, and you can see that if I move, this point is going to distort the picture that is touching all four quadrants, or all the points. It's going to distort all the quadrants touching the point. So I'm going to go ahead here, and you can see that I am smearing Australia. Sorry for any Aussies that may have been offended, uh, or uh, or may have gotten dizzy from me shifting around their lovely place over there. So I'm going to go ahead and just undo that, and I'm going to go down to my 2D representation, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this point, and I'm going to make Australia fit into this one quadrant back here, or this one segment. And as you can see, that as I move these points around, that Australia is now in this quadrant. Let's say I wanted to move it down to another quadrant so it's a little closer to Antarctica. I can do that. I can take this quadrant, or this segment, move it down, and let's ignore what's happening to the rest of the world right at the moment, but you can see that I effectively told my 3D object, hey, Australia no longer is going to belong in that one quadrant. I want it to go down into this section a little closer to Australia, or Antarctica. And right now, Australia is pretty tiny. Let's say I wanted it to take up more of the volume. I'm going to bring this a little closer, and you can see that Australia is now taking up more of the space within that quadrant, or that section. Pretty cool. Alright, so that is it for this one example. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my next example. And we have a 3D box. Oh, there we go. Now it's there we go. Fix that slight problem there. So now we have a 3D box. And here is our 2D representation of our 3D box and our texture in here. So let me hide my texture real quick. So you can see that here is our representation. We have these planes, these faces, if you will, all being split up, cut up, and put into here. Now, you can let's kind of demonstrate. Let's bring the image back, and I'm just going to go ahead hit play. Essentially, what happens. So this is basically the layout that we have. We have our object. We have our 3D object split up into little cuts. And if you can kind of remember, I don't know if anyone else had did this exercise in elementary school. You start off with a piece of paper, and then you cut it up, and then you start gluing it together. Or you color it first, and then you cut it, and you glue the edges together. This is essentially what I did, but in reverse. So what we have here is the 3D object split up and kind of looking like the shape of our 2D representation of our 3D object. This is just to show you, one, this is how it used to be done. UVs never before UVs were around. We would go ahead and cut our 3D object up, color it that way, and then texture it, and then animate it back. So we would come back here, and then come to this state. So then our colors would be where we would want them. That is a lot of work. Always will be, and we're just going to go ahead and ignore that, or not ignore. Just keep in mind that UVs were, or texturing, coloring your model was a bigger task in the past. Well, anyway, with this example, I just wanted to kind of show you that essentially what we do when we do our UVs, we essentially in the 2D version we basically cut up different sections and say, all right, I want this point here and that point there. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit play one more time. Okay, and then let's say I wanted to rearrange these. Let's say I wanted all of these faces to have one image on here. So I'm going to go ahead and just move. Let's go to UV. And then I'm going to take this top quadrant here right now. I'm going to take this and just bring it over this guy. Let's say I want all of my points to have that same image. And you can see that I'm taking each section, each segment, and just saying, hey, I don't want you to have what's underneath you. I want you to have where I'm putting you. So there we go. So as you can see that all my images, or all my faces, are having the same pattern on it. Only because that's what I defined in my picture. So I took the 2D representations of these segments and saying, all right, I want you here, go here, and just show on your 3D counterpart what's underneath you. Be proud. So I'm going to go back, and then you can see that, there we go. All the faces have the same image on there. And then if I go back, I can go and I can say, hey, I want you to be halfway in between. I want you to be smaller. Or I want the image to be bigger here. So I'm going to make this smaller. I'm going to define this. So it's like that. So that is the basic intro to UVs.